It's Christmas Day here in our hometown of Castlebar, and we are standing outside of Mayo University Hospital, where we have spent all of this day really. We've maintained a presence here since 8 o'clock this morning, and now it's about 5:30. We're making this video because really I'm shocked and appalled and really saddened by what I've experienced here over the last number of weeks. Now, I've just been visiting an elderly gentleman whom I have been looking after, really a neighbour, an elderly man, looking after him for the last number of years, over 5 years. And recently, about 7 weeks ago, he was admitted to this hospital with a problem that was very treatable. And you know, he was getting on, he was alert when he came in, alert for the first while, but then we noticed a change, that the man was suddenly very tired, and we discovered subsequently that he was drugged to such an extent that he could no longer eat or drink. Now, what is shocking to me is that food was being brought to this man day after day and not touched, wheeled up to his bed, not touched, and wheeled away again. And the man was left here in the bed, having nothing to eat, nothing to drink, except what we managed to give him when we called. And we did make a point in our work to leave it and to come in to see him regularly. But it's shocking this time of Christmas to think that the staff in this hospital could wheel up food to this man and take it away, and nobody cared. Nobody asked, nobody cared. We raised this with them. We knew the man was deeply dehydrated and without food. We experienced him. We come in. You know, we've been here. We've given him drinks. He grasps the can. He drank a full can of drink when we give it to him, and wouldn't let it go. He was so dehydrated. We raised the issues with the hospital to no avail. And I'm making this video because I want to highlight this and make you aware. If you have a relative in this hospital, do not assume, an elderly person especially, do not assume that they're being looked after. My experience, sadly, has been that this man has been left to die, killed really in this situation, in this hospital. You know, he's now critically ill. This evening, he is critically ill, but not because of the condition he had when he came in, but because he has been left without food and water day in and day out. Now, we have raised this with them. And I feel sorry for any elderly person that's in here, in this hospital, that does not have relatives that care for them. They're just neglected, left to die. And it's terrible that we have to say this, that we have to highlight, but we need to highlight this, that what is happening in this hospital, and I believe in other hospitals, that elderly people are being neglected on purpose. They're being left to die. It's not just this man. You know, I've been looking around the ward. I've been in here a lot. There's men crying out for help, and you know, nobody's coming to help them.
Staff are standing around.
And yet and the staff are standing around, and yet when I go out into the hallway and call for help, somebody arrives. So they were there. The staff are there, but the people are not cared for. And you know, I'm shocked about this, and I want to make you aware of this evening, and to say again that if you have relatives in here, you know, elderly people in here that are not able to speak for themselves, you know, don't assume that they're being looked after, because in my experience they are not. They are not, and they're going to early graves, which should not be.
Yes, and we believe a decision has been made to let this man die. So as Seán has said, we have been visiting this man in the hospital here for weeks, and we have raised our concerns. We've raised those concerns repeatedly. Now, yesterday, we came in yesterday evening on Christmas Eve, and we found this man highly sedated. We were very concerned about him. And that's why then the next morning, today, we came into hospital early in the morning at around 8 a.m. To see how he was doing. Now, when we arrived at the bed, he was really like a dying animal. He was in a critical condition, and there was practically no one around in this ward where he was. And we raised the alarm immediately. We asked for a nurse. A nurse finally arrived. We challenged the nurse. We said, this is a disgrace. This is unacceptable that a man is left dying on a bed with no food, with no drink, with no means of eating, and drugged, heavily drugged out, sedated, clearly critical at this point. The nurse was very, very defensive. She eventually called the security at the hospital. So we had about 3 or 4 men at the door. Security came in. This man asked us to leave. There was a flurry of activity then at that point. We saw doctors arriving, nurses, the duty manager arrived. And what we had then was a great show of activity. Such like I've never seen since the man was admitted to hospital. Apparently he was brought in for a CT scan. And this is essentially just a great show of doctors and staff around a bed then of a man when the condition has reached a critical point. Now, we've had to come in to feed this man and to assist him with eating and drinking because, you know, he came into the hospital with an ailment. But instead of that being treated and dealt with, he was being prescribed antipsychotic drugs, sedatives, and sleeping tablets. And what these drugs do, these antipsychotic drugs, for example, haloperidol and midazolam, they essentially knock out a patient and put a patient into a stupor and a knocked out state so that they can't communicate, they can't eat or drink. They're in really a permanent sleep, a drowsy state. Now, we understand that patients are injected with these drugs often late at night or early in the morning, and sometimes relatives are not even aware of what is going on, and this leaves patients in just a lethargic state. That they can't ring the call bell, they can't call for help. They're not aware of what's going on around them in the hospital. They may not even be aware that food is being brought, left at the bed, and then taken away. They don't have the energy to eat or to drink, and it leaves them in a critical state of dehydration and then malnutrition because they're not able to feed themselves or to drink. And of course, very sadly, that then just leads to an inevitable failure in the long run of organs, heart failure, and death. And this is a criminal situation that's happening here. We've seen patients and their phone is ringing and they're not answering the phone. They're not able to answer the phone. They maybe don't know it's ringing. And then that leads to relatives perhaps ringing the hospital looking for an update on their relative. And oftentimes they're told by the hospital, oh, he's comfortable or she's comfortable. And really that just means that's code language for what we're talking about. That they're on these drugs, these sedatives, and really on a pathway to death. Now, these people that we're talking about, these patients, are often the most vulnerable of society. They're the people, elderly people perhaps who are single men in particular, or others who perhaps their spouse has died. Perhaps they don't have many to look after them, to care for them, and these are the people who are in these situations. And you know, as Christians, we have a duty to the vulnerable, to the people who are oppressed, to the needy, to those who don't have a voice for themselves. And it's an absolute disgrace what is happening here in this hospital under the name of care and healthcare. This is a case of someone being sedated and
Yes.
heavily drugged,
Drugged.
as far as we understand, and therefore unable to eat or drink. This is inhumane, it's cruel, and it's vile abuse, and it needs to be called out. And this is not an issue of resources, it's not an issue of staffing.
Yeah.
So don't let people tell you that, politicians and so on. This is a case of someone being left to die in Mayo University Hospital at our doorstep. I'm very sad to say that over the past few weeks, I've really not seen any staff member make any serious effort to see this man fed, to see him a drink, to see him looked after. And we've had to come in day after day and do that work ourselves. And it's a shocking and inhumane state of affairs. And when you hear these politicians, our local politicians, come out and say, there needs to be more resources, we need more buildings, we need higher pay, etc. for the staff, don't listen to them, because that's not the problem here.